Yo, what is going on, you guys? So today I'm bringing guys a brand new sports cards video. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down how to properly value a sports card. I know it's a super simple topic, but at the same time, there are a ton of nuances that I believe some of the tips that I have over the last 6 years doing this, I believe could help some of you guys. But before we get into that, I did want to say real quick, we have reopened our membership program. We haven't been allowing new members for a while, but we just reopened it. Our members have been making a lot of money. I'm not going to go too into it. There's so many different details, but there's a lot of money to be made in the sports car market, and we've been guiding our members. So if you're a member, if you want to become a member, click the link down below. But without further ado, we're going to hop right into the video. All right, guys, so the first platform we are on is Alt. We're going to be going over the first basics, which is pretty much like how to value a very common card. Cards like these would be the easiest to value. So if we look, for example, like a Tom Brady Bowman Chrome PSA 9, this is a card that there are over 2,000 of them. Pretty common card. You're going to get a ton of sales data. So if you're on Alt, you search up the card, you just go to recent transactions, you're going to get data from alt auctions. You're going to get it from Golden, eBay, Fanatics, Collect, and a bunch of different platforms. So you're going to get a lot of these auction houses on there, Golden, eBay, and you're going to get a lot of data on how this card sells. So you can see right here, according to alt, the sales have been between 2,000 and 2,250. A good way to do it with Card Ladder is to kind of double check. So Card Ladder is actually really cool because if you search up the sales and you go to base, you can search by grade and you can get what they value the card at, which is usually obviously going to be based off sales prices. However, you do have to be careful because the value for each sale is going to be different. So this is not one value for all LeBron PSA 10s. This is just simply based off of this $4,150 sale. So what it's saying is it's down a tad bit since the last couple of days since it sold. The good thing is you get an average price. So if you go to view all sales, you're going to get, so this is the average price for the last 3 months has been $4,243. You can go by 1 month. So the average price is $4,300. 2 weeks, if a player is more hot for the last couple weeks, and their prices have gone up since the last 2 weeks, for example, if they won a Super Bowl 2 weeks ago, this would be a better indicator. And then, of course, you can get a yearly average. There's a lot of cool tools that you can get to kind of map out, all right, this card has been super stable around that $4,100 to $4,200 price range. So that would be a card I'd probably want to value if I'm buying the card at $4,200. If I'm selling it, I would say that's the value. Probably accurate values around $4,200. We won't spend too much time on this because I know that's a little bit easier to value, but for the cards that do not sell very often. So you can look for logo mans out of 10s. There's a lot of cards that just do not sell very often. For example, if we're looking for like a Jalen Brunson 2018 National Treasures card, this card may be a little bit tougher to value. So you're going to see some sales. You're going to see, okay, there's an out of 20 FOTL PSA 9 that did a little over 7,000. Okay, there's a BGS 9 of that same card that did 7,200 right before. So right off the bat, you would say, okay, this card's maybe down a little bit because PSA is better than BGS. You can look at the patches. They're pretty similar. Same card. If the PSA sold on alt in February, it may be a $7,400 card. A good kind of gauge. I use these gauges a little bit. I would not say it's the only gauge you want to use because it is oftentimes not fully accurate. But the alt market trends and the alt data is usually pretty decent. What I would do is search up Brunson. If I'm trying to buy a card that hasn't sold in a month of Brunson, you can see kind of what his market's done. So according to alt, his market is up almost 5% in the last 90 days. And basketball in general is going up. So we can see that if a card sold 90 days ago, that's a decent gauge on what to kind of put on it. But I would say the more accurate way, if I'm trying to gauge, okay, this card, for example, if I'm trying to buy this card now, this card sold in January for $9,300. Card Ladder now says it is a $10,000 card. you can look at all different sales of this card. So I would first look at all graded sales. So this card is out of 20. This was the BGS 95. So I'm getting good multipliers. I guess you could say multipliers are going to depend on each card specifically, but overall you can kind of see other sales of the cards that are more recent, which is very helpful to see a sale of a PSA 9 from February, to kind of reinforce what, a 9.5 would be worth today's market. So that is a good tool to use. And then you can look for similar cards, more rare cards of Brunson that maybe have sold a little bit more often. So we can look at a Prism Blue, for example. This is a card that is going to move pretty similar to, not quite the same, but at least in the same category as an NT in terms of desirable lower pop Brunson cards. So you can try to compare a little bit. This is out of 199. True NT is out of 99. You're not going to get it perfectly, but you can kind of see how this card has done over the last couple months. So we're seeing, last year this card was a $750 card, $500 card, and now it's a $1,300 card. So if a card that you're looking to buy hasn't sold since January of last year, you can see that his Blue Prism went up over 4 times since the last sale of whatever card you're looking for. If you're looking for day-to-day price action, base prisms always work. I don't typically recommend them if you're buying more rare cards because base prisms move at a little different pace, but at least it gives you a decent feel for his market. So we can see his base prisms have been pretty steady around that $60 to $70 price point over the last couple months. But oftentimes you're going to see his rare cards go up before his base prisms because it's just a more common card and it takes a little bit more for that price to go up. So I would say overall it's a decent gauge to see, okay, his base prisms have gone up a little bit or have stayed the same, but it wouldn't be something I would use for in National Treasures, for example, but it's still good to kind of get that ratio. I would say other things would be, if I'm trying to price out a Kobe Bryant Flawless patch auto. These are honestly some of the toughest cards that I've had to price out in recent memory, which is why I'm taking these as examples. You're going to see a ton of different sales from different years, but oftentimes each specific card doesn't sell for a couple of years at a time, if not at least a year at a time. So like this Emerald out of 5, for example, this card will not sell very often. It'll probably be a card that pops up once every couple months, if not once every couple of years. But you're going to see different years pop up. You're going to see different, numbers. So this is the Emerald. You may see the out of 25 pop up for sale. So how you really value these, it's a little bit more of a nuanced approach. You want to look towards his overall market, first of all, what they have done. So it's very helpful when you have flawless cards that are similar, that have sold multiple times. So I would try to find cards that have sold multiple times. So I would look at these recent sales and say, okay, this 9.5, for example, this card has sold quite a bit. It's a good overall indication of how Kobe's flawless market has been doing. So this card right here in a 9.5, it sold last year in January for almost $11,000. Card ladder currently values at 12.5K. We saw it sold again in March for 10.2K. Card ladder on this one, okay, still 12.51K. So that is a good indicator that, that could be what it's worth. But then if you look at more recent sales, you're seeing, I believe this is a PSA 8 out of 25 that it sold for 14.2 thousand. So this becomes a little bit confusing, right? Because the 9.5 they're saying is worth 12K, and it sold last for 10K, but then a PSA 8 sold for over 14K. And then, of course, you have a PSA 10 that sold for 24K. So oftentimes there are some sales that are naturally higher than others. Would I still say the PSA 8 would be a $14,000 card? I think at this point with the PSA 10 at 24, it seems like a little bit of a strong sale for a PSA 8 to be selling for 14K with the PSA 10 at 24K. But also with the PSA 10 at 24K, where would you put this BGS 9.5? I think that's a great question. Clearly, I believe it's more than what Card Ladder says it is. I know, of course, from internally, I know that Kobe's flawless market has gone up a lot over the last year or two. But where would you put this? Because your mind would tell you it would have to be above a PSA 8, a lot above a PSA 8. But then it can't really come very close to a PSA 10. So this would probably be a card, in all honesty, if I were buying it, I would want to value around 14 to 15,000 based off of the overall trajectory of his market and the sales. Now, as a seller, you could look at this PSA 8 and say, man, it says the PSA 8 is worth almost 16,000. How does that really make sense? Because it also says the BGS 9.5 is worth 12.5 thousand. So there's a lot of nuances in these markets, and that's where you have to really do your research on the Kobe Flawless Patch Auto market. So the most recent sales of PSA 10 at 24,000, which based off my knowledge, that would probably put the BGS 9.5 between 14 and 18,000. But then you would also want to just look at other flawless patch autos. You would want to go through the same with other autos that have sold more often and get a better gauge at what it's worth. So if we look at this card, for example, a PSA 9 in 2023 had sold for 17.5K, and then a BGS 9.5 had sold for 34K. So you can see his market's definitely gone up a lot, because that same card, honestly, was a lot of the similar cards at that time were going for 15 to 20,000. So now you get a better gauge. You can see, of course, not all the sales, the timelines are exactly going to line up, but that gets you a better gauge by looking at more Kobe Flawless Patch Autos, how they've moved in price. And then the best thing to do is go back to that BGS 9.5, see where it sold for in whatever it was, January of 2024, and then see overall what his market's done. So if it's gone up roughly 40 to 50%, then I'd put that card around 14 to 15,000. But there's a lot that goes into it, and I think a lot of people get better as they go on, with how the price action moves for a lot of these cards. Figuring out, okay, sealeds go for a little bit more than nines overall. But of course, for thicker cards that are tougher to grade, it could be around the same depending on the card. For Kobe Flawless Patch Autos, they're about the same. And you can study this price action. So if I'm studying this action, I'm seeing on the same day a seal did pretty much the same price as a BGS 9. So next time that I see a BGS 9, I know that it goes for the same price as a sealed. I think one mistake that a lot of people make is not fully doing the research into a specific market. If you try to spread yourself too thin, what oftentimes happens is you don't have enough knowledge at each specific market. So a lot of people I know are Kobe Flawless Patch Auto guys. That's the world they live in. That's all the cards they buy, and that's all the research they do. And it makes, if you're an expert at a Kobe Flawless Patch Auto, for example, like this card, I was able to buy this card in a BGS 9.5 more recently for close to this comp, which was an obvious steal because his cards are up a boatload since then, and I was able to sell it for a 30 to 40% profit. And that is simply because I know, okay, if this card sold for 6,000 in March, based off my experience and doing research on other markets, I would say it's around a $9,000 card right now, which is exactly what it was, what it ended up being, at least what someone was willing to pay. So it's very important to study that price action across, similar cards, different years. A lot of them move the same in terms of percentage. A lot of the buyers are the same. So you're going to see that card ladder values, this values it as a $7,000 card, whereas I was able to move it for a lot higher. I bought this card as well, which was interesting. So this was a card that sold in April on an eBay auction. So there's just a lot of nuances that go into it. A lot of cards that go up a lot of cards that go down a lot. The worst would be if you catch it on the way down, because of course you see some of these cards, how low they had sold for last year. And on the flip side, you're going to see a lot of cards that, you want as much info as you can. So like a lot of Wembanyama cards, some of them sold as soon as the product released. So you're going to see some sales are just going to be extraordinarily higher than what they are worth right now. And Card Ladder oftentimes will not be able to fully get that value to where it's currently worth. And so that makes it a little bit tricky. Like if you're looking at Victor Wembanyama, 1/1, you can see that his Black Shimmer in April sold for $516,000 soon after the product released. Card Ladder says it's worth $407,000. But for a card like this, I would definitely want to look for, his gold and his other rare cards and see how much they have come down since April of 2024. Because if we look at, you know, the highest these cards have sold for in May, which was around that same time, this card did 150,000. And if you look more recently, there's going to be more sales of similar cards, such as black golds, that you can kind of piece the puzzle together. A lot of times for cards like this, it will be a puzzle to piece together. So this card, for example, that sold for 150,000, Card Ladder says it's worth 130,000. So it seems like Card Ladder thinks that Wembanyama's market's down roughly 20% in the last year or so. Do I, you would have to do more research to figure out would you agree with that or not. What I would do is try to find gold cards or other rare cards that have sold more recently. So maybe I'd go by date sold and try to see if you can find cards that you can compare with a sale from March. Rare cards that you can compare a sale from March. So that would be the homework to do, to find that card that has sold multiple times. So this card, for example, this Concourse Gold, has sold more recently for 5,500. So what I would do is go and see what that had sold for, back then. So what you could do is search this up, try to see similar sales of this card, and you will be able to get a sense of what that card was worth last year at that time, and that would give you a better picture. So if it's a $5,500 card now, it doesn't look like there were any other sales, so this would be a card that maybe you can't use, but you can use other sales like this. Like this card was a $14,000 card. This is probably a little bit better of a card, but not too much better of a card than the one we previously looked at. So maybe the card we previously looked at 5,500 that sold used to be worth 10,000. So maybe that card's cut in half. You want to really do all that research and figure out, because you can see that, this card of Wembanyama's, if it were to sell today, would probably be a 6. Yeah, so Card Ladder has it at 6,000. Exactly what I was going to say. So that card, it shows, has gone down more than 100% since that last sale. And maybe there is a more recent sale on this one. Point is that there's a lot of factors that go into it, and it's very important to do your research, to look at as many comps as you can before you buy a card or before you sell a card, to get an accurate value. And oftentimes there won't be an accurate value. If you look at it from one lens, you could see a card, you could argue is worth 6,000, but if you look at a card from another lens, you could think it could be worth 7,000, 8,000, whatever it is. So this card that sold for 14,000 in June of 2024 sold in December in a BGS 9.5 for 3,700. So that one put a PSA 10 more than 7,000. So that card's definitely down more than 100%. So there's a lot of ways you could get more information by doing this type of research. So I really urge you guys to do that type of research, and to piece together a full puzzle to come up with the value of a card. I hope this video was helpful in any way possible. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. But other than that, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'm out.